The Giants pulled off their first significant trade of the Buster Posey era. Here's why my first reaction was excitement, and then my second reaction was disappointment.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide episodes 3 days a week for now, back to 5 at some point in the month of February, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, hosting this show for coming up on 6 years, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. And where we get started is by discussing the first significant trade of the Buster Posey era. They traded off the Major League roster. They traded Taylor Rogers. Now, this is the left-handed non-submarining one of the twin brothers, Taylor Rogers, to the Cincinnati Reds in exchange for Braxton Roxby, a right-handed pitcher from the Reds organization, obviously. And so the reason that this jumped off the page for me is because on first glance, when you see the Giants trade Taylor Rogers, my thinking, and I think most people's thinking in the industry would be, at least if you're following the Giants closely, would be that they're shedding payroll in terms of they're trading away money in order to make an addition that maybe otherwise would have been more difficult for them to stomach financially or whatever. Like, there weren't a lot of ways for the Giants to reduce their payroll without significantly hurting their team. Like, if you look at guys who are tradable on the Giants, I guess you could say Mike Yastrzemski and his $9.25 million contract, but then that does leave you with a hole in right field where I suppose you could go out and sign a player or trade for a player or whatever, but their bullpen is pretty deep. And so the $12 million owed to Taylor Rogers seemed like, wow, okay, they're clearing out $12 million. The bullpen is a position of relative strength for the Giants, I believe, and projection systems believe it's probably the best part of this team. And so that was my first thought, clearing up $12 million. But then we get reports that have since been verified, seemingly. Maria Guardado of sfgiants.com, Andrew Baggerly, a Reds beat writer, reporting that the Giants are sending exactly half of Taylor Rogers' salary along with him to the Reds. And so instead of just dumping the $12 million, they're dumping $6 million and paying $6 million. So basically, the Giants are freeing up $6 million in salary here, and they're getting a prospect. And so it doesn't necessarily seem like a huge difference, but $12 million, like, the motivation changes when you realize that they didn't pay down the entire, or they didn't get rid of the entire contract. Now, maybe it was impossible. Maybe they couldn't have been able to find a taker, although there was an article in The Athletic that there were a lot of teams, I think it was in The Athletic. It actually, I'm actually forgetting where I saw it, but that Taylor Rogers was generating a lot of interest on the trade market. And so part of me was like, if he was generating a lot of interest on the trade market, this is kind of an underwhelming seeming return. Now, there is something up on Fangraphs. We'll talk about the return the Giants got in Braxton. It's so many. There's an X in the first name and the last name. Very unusual. Braxton Roxby, undrafted free agent. And we'll get into him a little bit later, but the first reaction was that this was about saving money that they could then reinvest elsewhere. However, Andrew Baggarly spoke to Buster Posey in what he described as a brief phone conversation, and Baggarly wrote on Blue Sky, which, by the way, I'm on there now. A lot of people have been asking. Not leaving Twitter or X, but I am also on Blue Sky, and my handle there is at benkaspick.com, Kaspick. So follow me there. And anyway, Baggarly Blue Skied, I don't know how you say that. He said he just talked to Posey, and Posey said he hated breaking up the Rogers twins, but they, the Giants, wanted to create chances for younger arms in the bullpen. Baggarly writes, doesn't sound like there are plans to reinvest the $6 million SF saved. And then a quote from Posey, we'll keep looking. I will say we feel pretty set with the roster the way it is right now, end quote. And so talk about a letdown of a quote, right? We feel pretty set with the roster the way it is right now. And just yesterday, we were discussing that the roster, the way it is right now, doesn't look like a winner. It doesn't look like a total loser. The Giants haven't been a total loser since 2018. So it's been a while since they've been like truly bad. 2017 was really bad. But other than that, even in 2019, they were not that much under 500. And then 2020, it was a short season, just barely under 500. 2021, 107 wins. 22, exactly 500. And then 23, like 3 games under 500. And then 2024, 2 games under 500. So they've just been treading water. And it looks like a team that figures to do more of the same going into this year. Of course, it is baseball, and you can just have a magical season. Look at 2021. Look no further than that. You don't need to win 107 games. You could win just 90, and that would qualify as like a successful season for this team. And the key point is that they wanted to create chances for younger arms in the bullpen. So I'm not going to totally rag on them for, it doesn't look like just a salary dump. Like, it makes sense, as we said yesterday as well, that they want to create opportunities for younger arms or players in general. Like, we talked about Ha-Sung Kim signing with the Tampa Bay Rays. And while there was a fit there potentially, it interferes with letting Tyler Fitzgerald play second base. And then if Kim is like playing second base, where does Tyler Fitzgerald play? You could make a case maybe they should have non-tendered Mike Yastrzemski or traded Mike Yastrzemski and put like Elliot Ramos in right and then let Fitzgerald play left or something like that. But also they've got all these young outfielders who are entering their final option year, and they need to find out if they can really play. Like if Marco Luciano's an outfielder, Luis Matos, he's definitely an outfielder, Wade Meckler, and I feel as though I'm forgetting even one more outfielder who's out of minor league options after this season. So anyway, in the bullpen, you looked at it. I look at the depth charts for the Giants a lot, and it was pretty, I don't want to say set, but now it's like super flexible in terms of whatever young arm they want to stick in there, and they have a lot of good young arms, they'll be able to do it, because the only player who cannot be optioned, who's currently projected into this starting bullpen, or like when I say starting bullpen, into the Major League bullpen, is Tyler Rogers. And there's no way you would want to option him anyway. But Ryan Walker, Camilo Doval, Eric Miller, Sean Jelly, Landon Roop, Randy Rodriguez, Tristan Beck. Like, there's so much youth and potential and flexibility with that group. And so just opening up another spot, like, there is a lot of logic there to that. But I also understand the disappointment that this move, because the Giants are sending $6 million along with Rodgers, probably means it's not a move. And the quote from Posey himself, to free up money to then reinvest and sign another player. So more about this, more about the return. And also we're going to get into the Giants apparently tried to trade for a pretty big bat this offseason. We'll get into that report in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. And live betting, the live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field. And the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's just the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. All right, as promised, we're going to get into more about the Taylor Rodgers trade to the Cincinnati Reds. What did Rodgers do in a Giants uniform? The implications of breaking up, the brothers, twins on your roster, and the players who stand to benefit from this. I really don't think they're going to reinvest this money. And then also this player the Giants tried to trade for that we learned about today in an article by Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic. So that's pretty significant news. And hey, a trade like that is still potentially on the table. There's no reason that it wouldn't be. It just hasn't happened. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. Coming up tomorrow, we will, I think, be doing a fresh round of mailbag questions as we are less than 2 weeks away from spring training getting underway. I know fans are getting a little antsy about the state of the team and the fact that they started off with a bang with Willy Adames, and then it's been pretty darn quiet ever since. This Taylor Rodgers trade, easily at least the third most significant thing that they've done this offseason, with just Adames signing Verlander and this Taylor Rodgers trade. So anyway, the bullpen, the guys who stand to benefit, you got to also look at the starting rotation. You've got Logan Webb, Robbie Ray, Justin Verlander, Jordan Hicks, Kyle Harrison. So I've mentioned there's a lot of injury risk there. There's also unprovenness risk there with the likes of Jordan Hicks and Kyle Harrison. And the strength of the Giants team seems to be this volume of talented young pitching that they have. When we look at, even just looking at that projected bullpen, and I'm talking about starting, like starter caliber pitchers in Landon Roop, Tristan Beck, Keaton Winn, and then we scroll down to guys who project to start the season in the minors. Hayden Birdsong, I don't know that he actually projects to start the season in the minors, but there's potentially a bullpen role for an extra guy, whether it's Hayden Birdsong or Landa Roop, whatever. I get creating a spot on the roster for an extra young arm, because this is the strength of their team. And it's not to say the plan would be to convert these guys to permanent bullpen roles. It would be to let them pitch. And if they pitch well, then you try them out in the rotation when you inevitably have underperformance or injury. Happens all the time. You need guys to make starts. And if they make starts and they're good, then they earn roles. So that's how it works, and that's how I would anticipate it going. So Hayden Birdsong, Trevor McDonald, Carson Seymour, Carson Ragsdale, Mason Black, those guys are all on the 40-man roster. And then you've got Joey Lucchesi, who's a non-roster invitee, a lefty. So he may have just, it could just be that they add him instead of one of these young arms. Not my preference. I'd like to see the young arms get a chance, because then it really is just about saving $6 million plus getting the young player in return, Braxton Roxby. So it remains to be seen exactly what the ramifications are. Even though Taylor Rogers has good numbers, like if you look at what he did with the Giants in 2 seasons, he pitched 111 and 2/3 innings. He had a 3.06 ERA. Boy, to me, does it not feel like he had a 3.06 ERA. I remember, obviously, he got off to a really rough start. I think it was in season 1, and then he threw his glove in the trash on television. And then he was really good after that point. But if you look at his strikeout rate, it has declined every year since 2021, from a high of 35.5% all the way down to close to league average at 25.7%. But he did have a 2.40 ERA in 2024. It was 3.83 the year before that. But what was so strange was that they never used him in high leverage situations. And so I've kind of tried to figure out why. He does have pretty significant platoon splits. At least he did in his 111 and 2/3 innings with the Giants. Like right-handed hitters hit like 1.7 home runs per 9 innings against him. He really shut down lefties, but he didn't do so well against righties. I know that when they first brought him in, he was like trying to throw a new pitch, a cutter, and he was going to throw it to righties, but that's about the time when he was throwing his glove in the trash can, because it just didn't work out well. And if you look at, newer metrics like Stuff Plus, which you can find on Fangraphs, it grades all of his pitches as below average, actually. His sinker being quite terrible, even. So it's just sinker slider when I say all of his pitches. But roughly, I think because it's called Plus, usually 100 is average overall, and it's saying the Stuff is about 8% below average. And location was below average as well. And so I'm not losing sleep over losing Taylor Rogers, even though he put up a 3.06 ERA with the Giants in 2 seasons. The fielding independent pitching was 3.83. Expected fielding independent pitching, 3.85. So, going to Cincinnati, too, it's not a great place to pitch. And so I wouldn't be shocked if he has an ERA close to 4 in Cincinnati. And this is the final year of his deal. The Rogers twins are not getting any younger together. They're both 34 now. And Tyler Rogers is also entering the last year of his deal. But for him, it's an arbitration. It's his final year of arbitration eligibility. But frankly, Tyler Rogers had a higher leverage role, and I think was just pretty clearly a better player, more reliable. He's making just $5.25 million in his final year of team control. And all of Tyler Rogers' pitches, believe it or not, grade as well above average. His slider has a Stuff Plus rating of 140, the sinker of 115, the Stuff Plus overall at 125, and location really good as well. So Tyler Rogers, he's put up a 2.93 ERA in his Giants career in 346 and 2/3 innings. And yet people give this guy a hard time as if he's some kind of gimmick, as if he's easily figured out, as if he's not good. I mean, he's been nothing but really good since the moment he put on a uniform. The only season where he wasn't really good was 2020, and that was the shortened season, and all the peripheral numbers were really good. It was just a 4.50 ERA, but a 3.18 expected ERA, 3.26 fielding independent pitching. So he's just been good his entire career, Tyler Rogers, and he's still on the team. So Posey did mention, there's a quote here. He said, "Hate to break the brothers up." And this is from Andrew Baggerly in a story that he wrote in The Athletic. And he continued to say, "It's the last year of Taylor's deal. It's a chance for us to look at some other arms. We've got a lot of guys in camp, including a group of interesting non-roster guys. It does create a little more competition in the bullpen." And then regarding the idea of flexibility, in terms of sending guys up and down with, like I said, they have so many guys with minor league options and they could use them and cycle through arms. Posey pumped the brakes on that. He said, "I really don't want to send guys up and down a ton. Seeing the way it can impact guys, it's not something we want to do. Of course, you have to. It's part of the game. But it's not something that played a role here," end quote, in terms of making the trade. So, yeah, it also just reminds me that, the Giants continue to just trade away contracts that they signed players to. There's a long list. Alex Wood, Anthony DeSclafani, Mitch Haniger, Jorge Soler, Taylor Rogers. I'm sure Mark Melancon. That was a signing by the previous regime, a trade by Farhan Zaidi. But a lot of the Farhan Zaidi signings have been traded away as well. And it's kind of like a win to get rid of the contract. But it's you signed these guys to the contract, so you can't be too happy about that. It's not exactly something to pat yourself on the back about, if you know what I'm saying. So this is just another example of a player they signed and then traded away, and you're not too upset about that player being traded away. So anyway, Luke Jackson, another. I'm just trying to find some examples. Luke Jackson, another guy. So yeah, I mean, that just kind of sums it up. It's disappointing. If they had gotten all $12 million back and maybe no player in return, just got the Reds to take on the contract, that would be more exciting because it would seem to indicate that they're going to reinvest that money. Otherwise, I would straight up call them out for being just cheap. But there is a logical rationale to this. It remains disappointing that they don't seem to plan to reinvest that money, but that could always change, especially when you hear reports about the one we're going to talk about in just a second, that the Giants tried to acquire in a trade this potentially impact bat earlier in the offseason, and they just weren't able to line up on it. But that player remains on the team he was on all along. So that means that player's still in play. And honestly, that player probably will get traded at some point in the next calendar year. And so the fact that we know the Giants were and perhaps still are interested is certainly worth talking about. So we will get into that and talk about who it is in just a minute. And before we do, all right, here we go. We're going to get into this player. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see who it is. If you're not on YouTube, I've just been teasing you the whole time that the Giants reportedly tried to acquire this offseason. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. Unless some news comes up, I think I'm going to send out a prompt for mailbag questions. I honestly just recently discovered we had a social media meeting for Locked On, and I didn't realize that there's a YouTube community page where you can post things like questions. So a lot of you have asked about putting the questions on YouTube, and I think I'm going to do that for the first time ever. So look out on YouTube, look out on Twitter, look out on Blue Sky. I'm going to post the prompt for questions everywhere that I can find it. I don't yet have, we're working on getting a show account for Instagram and TikTok. So that's all in the works. But for now, YouTube, Blue Sky, and Twitter, you should be able to find the prompt. So please no duplicates. That would just make my life harder. But just send them one of the places and I should be able to find it. So anyway, the player in question is someone we have talked about as a trade candidate for the Giants multiple times. There's at least one time it was asked in a mailbag question. I can't remember if we talked much more about it, but we did describe this player as a high quality fit as a trade candidate, and that player is Luis Robert Jr. of the Chicago White Sox. So what to know about the White Sox is that they are coming off the worst season in Major League history. They lost, I believe, 121 games in 2024, and so anything that's not nailed down, they should be looking to sell, especially when you look at they're not going to be competitive in the next 3 years. And Luis Robert is only under team control for the next 3 years. And so it would definitely behoove the White Sox to trade Robert, but there's not a rush to do it just now. I think they need to do it prior to the 2026 offseason, which means you could do it after 2025. You could do it during the 2025 trade deadline or possibly the 2026 trade deadline as well. So there's no real pressure on them to do this now. And the team control, by the way, is a $15 million guarantee this year and then two $20 million club options. They may have to get picked up together. I'm not sure because it says there's a $2 million buyout only on the first club option for 2026. So anyway, that's a total of $55 million over 3 years for Luis Robert, who is 27, doesn't turn 28 until August, and he's battled injuries. If you look at the games played, I mean, only one time has he played more than 100 games in his career, and that was 2023. But in 2023, he hit 38 home runs and stole 20 bases and had a .542 slugging, and he's a free swinger. Look at the chase rates. They're pretty high, and the strikeout rate is pretty high. It's 27% in his career. But he also plays good defense, and that's something that's, I think, very significant, like really good defense in center field. This is a guy who's put up 15 defensive runs saved in his career, 27 outs above average, and that's in center. And so if you were to put this guy in a corner, you know, the sky's the limit for, like, there's tons of just, this guy's like oozing upside. Potential 30-30 player. He's never stolen more than 23 bases, so I don't want to throw 30 steals on him, but you know, he's hit almost 40 home runs in the major leagues in one season. But in his career, he's been 16% above average by weighted runs created plus, with his best season being 2021 in just 68 games, 155 weighted runs created plus. But, you know, shortened season due to, I guess, injuries. I don't know. His issue to end the season was his ribs. I don't know exactly what was going on, but getting to the report, it was written by Ken Rosenthal and Will Salmon in The Athletic and published today. And what they say that the Reds tried for Luis Robert, but also that, and by the way, here in this article, it says each club option has a $2 million buyout. So that's kind of displayed incorrectly on Roster Resource on Fangraphs, just for what it's worth. Or they don't put it in, never mind, doesn't matter. They write, quote, well, I'll get to the second part second. They write, quote, the San Francisco Giants also expressed interest in Robert earlier this offseason, but those talks too failed to produce a trade. The White Sox now appear likely to carry Robert into spring training. They did the same last spring with potential free agent right-hander Dylan Cease, and ultimately traded him to the San Diego Padres on March 13th. So to say that they are likely to carry him into spring training doesn't mean at all that he's not going to get traded at some point before opening day. So I think that remains in play. I think the holdup would probably be that the White Sox would want, and I think justifiably so, not Luis Robert. They would want Bryce Eldridge in a trade. And so that's where you say, pretty much we'll give you anything but Bryce Eldridge. And I think you're going to hit a stalemate there. And the Giants don't have the deepest farm system ever. I know farm system rankings have them down right now. A lot of that is due to graduation of players like Marco Luciano, Luis Matos, Elliot Ramos, some of the young pitching. Like, these guys are no longer eligible to be on prospect lists because they've lost their rookie eligibility. And so that's going to hurt you dramatically if those are some, top 100 type prospects, which a lot of those guys are and were. But let's just read what else was written here. Quote, the teams did not resolve how much of Robert's salary the White Sox would have paid, sources said. Reds infield prospect Edwin Arroyo, who missed all of last season after undergoing surgery to repair a torn labrum in his non-throwing shoulder, was one player under discussion, but ultimately the Reds could not get comfortable with the total cost. And so for the Giants, they should be willing to just take on all the money. But from the White Sox perspective, and I mean, maybe that's where this maybe that does play a role, like clearing some money would possibly be a factor in saying we can take on all of that salary owed to Luis Robert. So, I mean, that would be a big upgrade. It would push Mike Yastrzemski out of a job. You'd probably put Robert in right, or Jung-Hoo Lee could play right. Either or, it would give you just some good defenders out there. You also need a DH. Like, we're looking at a team that kind of has an undefined DH right now. And Robert would just be a huge add for this team. I know that he's had health issues. That's definitely a concern. And honestly, in some ways, it's a good thing, because if he was healthy all the time, the cost would be astronomical. But the health issues he's had, and he didn't have the best season in 2024, in part because of the health issues, have hurt his value a little bit. Actually, he didn't have a good season at all. He was below average offensively and worth just half a win above replacement. So it dawns on me we never actually got into the return for Taylor Rogers here. So we will discuss, what's his name? Braxton Roxby tomorrow. He's a right-handed pitcher, and there's a little bit of an interesting backstory to Braxton Roxby. So in addition to the mailbag, and hopefully we just kind of get a question about the Rogers trade, we'll be able to mix that in with the mailbag questions. But that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X or Blue Sky at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick, and it's at benkaspick.com on Blue Sky. That threw me off. I don't remember what I normally say after that. On Twitter, at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a ton, so thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. Today, you are now Locked On Giants.